What if everything you thought you knew about the fundamental building blocks of reality, the atom, was about to be radically redefined?
Hmm.
Imagine an atom not as a tiny solar system with discrete particles, but as a living, breathing, dynamic system of fields, constantly in flux, perhaps even influenced by consciousness itself.
That's a pretty profound starting point.
It really is.
Yeah.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into a truly fascinating and, frankly, profoundly challenging paper titled Unified Atomic Coherence Designs. It's authored by Philip Randolph Lillian from the Holonomics Institute of Coherence Physics.
Right.
And this isn't just, a minor tweak to existing theories. It feels like a complete paradigm shift that promises to reshape our very understanding of matter and maybe our place within the universe.
That's precisely right. The paper introduces the Unified Atomic Coherence Physics Framework, or UACP, as you said, and its core proposition is, well, it's a monumental departure from traditional physics.
Monumental how?
It redefines the atom not as a simple collection of distinct, hard particles, protons, neutrons, electrons, but rather as a sophisticated, nested resonance field system.
Nested resonance fields.
Think of it less like tiny billiard balls and more like a complex, self-organizing symphony of energies and information perpetually in motion. It really moves us far beyond that familiar, almost ingrained planetary model of the atom that most of us grew up learning.
The little solar system model, yeah. Okay, let's unpack this then. Our mission for you today is to explore this bold new vision of the atom.
Let's do it.
We'll get into how UACP interprets everything we thought we understood, from the very nature of mass and charge to the atom's stability and its chemical identity.
All the fundamentals.
Exactly. And crucially, we'll examine the profound implications this framework has for our understanding of reality itself. We're going to challenge some of your deepest assumptions about the physical world.
Indeed. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is that this model isn't merely a minor adjustment. It's not just tweaking the edges of existing theories. No, it's presented as a comprehensive restructuring. It rigorously integrates concepts from what the paper calls the universal field tensor, or UFT, and the coherent symmetry group, the CSG. By weaving these elements together, UACP proposes a genuinely unified description of atomic structure.
Unified in what sense? Across scales.
Exactly. This approach has the potential to bridge phenomena across vastly different scales, from the quantum realm, naturally, up to relativistic physics, and remarkably, even into the complex processes we see in biology.
Biology. Wow, okay.
Yes. It aims to offer a holistic view, potentially filling in the gaps that often exist in current scientific paradigms by positing this common underlying principle of coherence.
Right. So let's start with that familiar picture. For many of us, the atom remains that tiny solar system. Electrons orbiting a dense nucleus, lots of empty space in between.
Yeah.
It's simple, it's intuitive, almost etched into our collective scientific consciousness.
It is, isn't it? It's a very powerful image.
But if UACP sees the atom as a field, how does it fundamentally challenge this conventional, deeply ingrained picture? What's wrong with the tiny solar system analogy?
Well, it's a complete paradigm shift, as you said. And honestly, the tiny solar system analogy, while maybe useful for introducing the idea of distinct components early on, it ultimately falls short. It can even be quite misleading.
So,
Traditional quantum models, even when they move to probabilistic electron clouds instead of fixed orbits, still largely rely on a dense, localized nucleus as a central, hard entity.
right, the solid core.
Exactly. And this inherently creates what the UACP paper calls a void-based conception of atomic space. It implies that much of what we consider matter is actually empty space, with these discrete particles just existing within a vacuum. This view inherently separates the particle from the space it inhabits.
Okay, that makes sense, the particle in the void.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is that UACP proposes a radical departure from this. It views both the nucleus and the electron fields not as distinct, separate particles, or even just probability clouds floating in nothingness,
But
as continuous resonance manifolds. Imagine a sustained, intricate musical note that fills a space, or maybe a shimmering, constantly vibrating ripple across a vast, interconnected field. That's getting closer to the UACP atom.
So no empty space then, in the traditional sense.
No, not really. Instead, the entire volume of the atom is permeated by these dynamic interacting fields. It's filled with this structured coherence.
Continuous resonance manifolds. That sounds far more dynamic and less, empty than our traditional view. So The atom isn't just filled with stuff. It is the field itself.
Exactly, you've got it.
Mm-hmm.
These manifolds aren't static. They are sustained by incredibly precise coherence gradients.
Coherence gradients, like differences in energy.
Yes. Think of them as differences in energy or information density that drive the flow and organization of these fields. Much like temperature gradients drive weather patterns, these coherence gradients sculpt the atomic structure.
Okay.
And these gradients are anchored, the paper says, in what's called a hypergravity invariant frame.
Hypergravity invariant frame. That's a mouthful. What does that mean, practically?
It's complex, but try to imagine an underlying fundamental cosmic scaffolding. Or perhaps like a primordial ocean of potential that provides the stable background against which all these atomic forms emerge and are sustained. It's described as an omnipresent field, almost, with immense organizing power.
A foundational structure for reality.
In essence, yes. And this reframing completely eliminates the idea of void-based atomic space. It replaces it with a fully dynamic and continuous field architecture.
Right.
So in this model, the apparent solidity of matter, what lets you sit on your chair, what makes a table feel hard, isn't inherent to discrete particles bumping into each other.
It's not. Then what is it?
It's an emergent phenomenon. It arises from the incredibly complex and harmonized interaction of these nested coherence operators and resonance operators within this layered dynamic field geometry.
So solidity is like an illusion created by field interaction.
A very convincing illusion, yes. Or rather, a stable pattern emerging from field dynamics. The atom, then, is truly an active and interconnected system, not just a collection of inert marbles sitting in empty space.
Okay, wow. So if the atom isn't a collection of particles and its solidity is an emergent effect, what then becomes of its defining characteristics? You know, the things we measure, its mass, its charge, its spin, or even its chemical identity. The very properties that make hydrogen and gold gold. How are these interpreted in UACP? Are they still fundamental or something else entirely?
This raises an important question for you, the listener, and it's one of the most intriguing and paradigm-shifting aspects of UACP. In this framework, mass, charge, spin, chemical identity, none of these are seen as fundamental fixed traits that a particle simply has, like a built-in product.
Not built in.
Yeah.
Then what?
Instead, they are interpreted as emergent properties of something the paper calls coherence eigenvalue reduction.
Coherence eigenvalue reduction. Okay, let's break that down.
Right. Imagine a vast, intricate, shimmering tapestry of pure potential, the homoelectric vacuum we'll get to. Coherence eigenvalue reduction is like applying a specific filter, or maybe a specific resonance pattern, to this field.
A filter.
Yes, and this filter causes certain stable patterns, these eigenvalues, which are specific energetic configurations, to emerge and become localized, stabilized. These specific stable patterns are then perceived by us, or our instruments, as properties like mass or charge.
So the property is the stable pattern.
Exactly. It's the process by which raw potential becomes structured, observable reality. It radically shifts our view from the atom being a bag of fixed attributes to a dynamic process of becoming. Its identity is constantly being sculpted by its underlying field interactions and its environment.
So properties are outcomes of a dynamic process, not fundamental ingredients set in stone.
You've got it. They are effects, not fundamental causes in themselves.
That's a huge shift. I mean, if mass isn't an intrinsic trait, but an emergent outcome, does that fundamentally alter our approach to, say, engineering new materials? Does it suggest we could maybe dial in specific properties by manipulating these coherence fields?
Precisely. That's one of the huge potential implications. If we truly understand how these properties emerge from the coherence field, it logically opens up entirely new avenues for manipulation, for coherence engineering.
Right.
And furthermore, things like atomic stability and reactivity, which in conventional physics are largely explained by electromagnetic constraints. You know, the number of electrons, the shell structure.
Right, standard chemistry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here, those are seen as emerging from boundary coherence modulation.
Boundary coherence modulation.
Yeah.
Like the edge of the atom, is it actively controlling things?
Exactly like that. Think of it like a cell's active membrane, constantly sensing and responding to its environment, regulating what comes in and what goes out, maintaining its internal state.
An intelligent boundary.
It suggests a far more subtle and active process occurring at the very edge of the atomic system. The atom's internal coherence actively regulates its interaction with the external environment, determining not just how stable it is, but also how it chemically reacts, how it bonds, how it shares energy. It's an active, dynamic negotiation with its surroundings.
So less passive, more Interactive.
Very much so. So just to reiterate the core principle of UACP, because it's so central, an atom is not a discrete object, but a dynamic coherent system.
Right.
It's fundamentally composed of nested resonance fields. These fields are structured by a process of symmetry reduction and coherence selection, and crucially, they originate from what the framework terms the omnilectic vacuum.
The omnilectic vacuum, you mentioned it earlier as the source, the wellspring of all this coherence. That sounds like the very fabric of reality itself in this model.
It is portrayed that way, yes.
Can you tell us more about what exactly generates this coherence and how this foundational field shapes atomic structure? What are its intrinsic properties, according to the paper?
It is indeed presented as the bedrock. The coherence vacuum is the foundational, latent, energetic field from which all structured emergence arises. But it's vital not to picture it as a void, as emptiness.
Okay, not empty. Then what?
Think of it more like an ocean of pure, undifferentiated potential. A cosmic soup, if you like, of pure energy and information, constantly humming with possibility, but without definite form yet.
An ocean of potential.
Within this vacuum, there's a governing principle, the vacuum coherence tensor, or VCT.
VCT. Got it.
This VCT is what governs local symmetry gradients and field curvature. Think of the VCT as the underlying mathematical description, the rule book for how this vacuum can bend, sculpt, and organize itself.
So it's the physics of the vacuum itself.
Exactly. It's the blueprint and the sculptor's hand rolled into one, dictating the fundamental rules for how coherence can arrange itself in space and time, giving rise to all observable phenomena. It essentially lays out the fundamental geometric and energetic patterns available for reality to manifest.
Okay, so that's the source field. How does structure emerge from it?
Moving from this foundational vacuum, we then encounter the coherence gradient. This isn't just a static property, it's described as the active driving force behind field condensation.
Field condensation, like gas condensing in a liquid.
That's a decent analogy. It means that as coherence gradients become steeper or more intense as the field becomes more focused or organized in a particular region, they literally drive the fields to condense.
Okay.
This condensation is the process that ultimately leads to the emergence of particles. But it's crucial to understand these particles don't just pop into existence out of nothingness.
Right, you said they're emergent.
Yes, they emerge through a process of coherence reduction, where the diffuse potential of the vacuum localizes into a stable, observable form. It's a profoundly dynamic, active process where the field itself becomes increasingly localized and structured, manifesting as what we perceive as matter, like your water vapor condensing into a cloud, but on a cosmic scale, where the cloud is a proton or an electron field structure.
And within this dynamic process of field condensation, you mentioned earlier there are specific operators at play that shape and maintain this coherence. This sounded almost like a cosmic intelligence at work. Can you explain those again, the two crucial types?
Yes, these operators are absolutely vital to how structures emerge and persist. And you're right, they are indeed where the framework takes a turn that might challenge conventional thinking quite strongly.
Okay.
First, we have the asymmetry resonance operators. These are described in the paper as observer functions.
Observer functions, like us observing.
Not necessarily us specifically, but potentially a more fundamental observer principle. They play a critical role in reducing the vacuum's inherent pristine symmetry into observable structure. In essence, they act as a kind of active filter or a focusing lens.
The filter.
Yes, allowing specific patterns and forms to emerge from the vast, undifferentiated potential of the vacuum. They are not merely passive witnesses. The implication is they are actively involved in the act of making manifest, selecting what becomes real, in a sense.
Wow. Okay, what's the other type?
Then there are the symmetry coherence operators. And these are described, quite remarkably, as consciousness-like fields.
Consciousness-like fields. There it is again.
Yes. And they are depicted as actively maintaining atomic coherence. This is where it gets truly profound, I think. They aren't passive. They're actively working to sustain the incredibly intricate organization of the atom, resisting the tendency towards disorder, towards entropy.
Like a self-organizing principle.
Or even self-healing. Imagine a cosmic conductor guiding an orchestra, ensuring every note, every field vibration is in harmony. Their consciousness-like nature implies an intrinsic capacity for organization, memory, and perhaps even response to information.
Which suggests?
It suggests that a form of proto-consciousness isn't just an emergent property of complex brains, but something potentially fundamental to the universe itself, woven into the fabric of matter.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, as you say. The idea of consciousness-like fields. at the atomic level. That's quite a leap from standard physics. How does that connect to what we usually think of as physics? It sounds almost, well, philosophical rather than strictly scientific.
It is indeed a profound connection, and it definitely pushes the boundaries of our current scientific paradigms. It suggests a much richer interplay between what we traditionally categorize as physical and what we might consider consciousness or information.
So how does it connect to the physics side, the structure?
Within this framework, these operators, particularly the symmetry coherence operators and the asymmetry resonance operators, are intimately linked to that hypergravity invariant frame we mentioned earlier.
The underlying scaffolding, right.
Yes. This frame provides the background coherent structure for the entire universe. It acts as a kind of cosmic anchor, a deep well of fundamental organizing power. And it's this frame that ultimately dictates and anchors the formation of mass and the very fabric of space-time itself, according to the paper.
So the consciousness-like fields are tied to the foundation of mass and spacetime.
That's the proposal. These consciousness-like fields are not just incidental or metaphorical, they are deeply integrated into the fundamental fabric that gives rise to and maintains the physical properties of the universe at the atomic level.
Okay.
It implies that consciousness or conscious-like processes aren't just an emergent property of complex systems like brains, which is the standard view,
Right.
but are potentially fundamental to the universe's self-organization, inherent in the very act of matter taking form and sustaining itself. It suggests the universe isn't a dead, inert machine, but perhaps a living, self-organizing system with some form of intrinsic intelligence or awareness.
That's a lot to take in. Okay, so if the atom is this dynamic field system, constantly being shaped by these gradients and these consciousness-like operators, how is it organized internally? You mentioned nested fields. What are its structural layers in this new view? And how do they differ from the familiar electron shells and a solid nucleus we're used to? This sounds like a completely different architectural blueprint.
It absolutely is a different blueprint, and that's an excellent question because the internal structure is where the model truly diverges from conventional understanding. Instead of static layers or shells, imagine peeling back the layers of a shimmering, vibrantly alive onion, but this onion is made of pure, flowing coherence.
A coherence onion. I like it.
Ha! Yes. We can walk through 5 distinct structural layers described in the paper, and you'll immediately notice their revolutionary, non-traditional nature moving from the very core outward.
Okay, layer 1.
The very first and most profound layer is the hypercoherent seed field.
Hypercoherent seed field.
This is described as the bivector resonance point that initiates local atomic structure. To put it simply, think of it as the ultimate quantum spark. The very first infinitesimal flicker of organized form that springs directly from the analytic vacuum's coherence.
The first ripple in the pond.
A good way to think of it, it's not a particle, but a fundamental geometrical configuration, a primordial point of energetic intent from which the atom's unique structure begins to unfold, like a blueprint in motion. It's the point where pure potential starts to define itself as this specific atom.
Wow. Okay, what's next? Moving outward, or inward rather.
Moving toward the conceptual center, nestled there, we have the nucleus coherence core. And this is absolutely crucial. It is not a dense center in the way we typically imagine a nucleus, a collection of protons and neutrons packed together like tiny marbles.
Not a bag of marbles. Okay, then what is it?
Instead, it's described as an infinitesimal coherence pole, a field node of infinite coherence curvature.
Infinite coherence curvature.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Like a black hole?
The analogy isn't perfect, but it captures the intensity. It's a point of immense informational density and field intensity, rather than a physical mass in the conventional sense. Imagine a point where spacetime itself, or the underlying field, is so incredibly curved or focused that it becomes a singularity of organizing energy, a pure point of informational intent that dictates the atom's identity without being a hard physical object itself.
So the nucleus isn't a little ball of matter, but an incredibly concentrated point of coherence, like an energetic black hole of information. That's truly mind-bending. It completely redefines matter at its core.
It really does. Then, surrounding this profound core, we find the toroidal shell cascade.
Toroidal, like donut shape.
Exactly. These are described as dynamic, nested field shells that are notably non-spherical. This is a significant departure from the classic spherical electron orbitals we often visualize.
Right, the SPDF orbitals. They're usually shown as spheres or lobes.
Yes. Instead, imagine them as nested, constantly swirling, donut-shaped fields, or perhaps like a series of interconnected smoke rings within the atom. These toroidal shells aren't just empty spaces marking energy levels.
So,
No, they actively encode energy levels, they define the orbitals, and they mediate all the intricate field interactions that define the atom's behavior and chemical properties. And importantly, they are not static. They are in constant dynamic motion, forming a complex interwoven structure of flowing coherence.
okay, nested donuts of energy. What's flowing in them?
That brings us to the next layer, the electron coherence flow. Again, critically, this is described as continuous resonance loops, specifically helical or toroidal loops, not discrete particles.
No discrete electrons still.
Still no discrete particles in the traditional sense. The idea of individual electrons as tiny orbiting balls is completely replaced here by a continuous flowing river of coherent energy. It's constantly circulating and interacting within these toroidal pathways defined by the shell cascade.
So the electron is the flow.
Precisely. This continuous flow is what gives rise to the phenomena we attribute to electrons, such as charge and spin, but without the need for a localized discrete particle. It's a field manifestation, a pattern of flow, not a tiny thing.
Okay, and the final layer, the outermost one.
And finally, the outermost layer described is the boundary negentropy layer.
Negentropy.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of entropy, right? Order instead of disorder.
Exactly. This layer is absolutely vital for the atom's very existence and stability. It encodes the atom's inherent coherence resistance to entropy. As you said, entropy is the tendency towards disorder.
Universe running down.
Yes. This layer actively defines the atom's negentropic boundary. It essentially acts as an intelligent, active shield that works to maintain its internal order, its coherence, against the constant tendency toward disorder and decay from the external environment.
Like an immune system for the atom.
That's a great analogy. Constantly filtering, organizing, and maintaining integrity.
This layered structure sounds far more complex and fluid than the simple spheres we often visualize. Use of the classical quantum mechanics atom model with its spherical phases is seen as a degenerated projection. What does that mean exactly for a projection to be degenerated? And what are the true geometries at play in this UACP model?
Right. The classical QM atom model, with its tidy spherical phases and probability clouds, is indeed seen in UACP as a degenerated projection of a much deeper, more complex field topology.
Degenerated meaning simplified,
Yeah,
less informative.
exactly. Think of it like a shadow. A 2D shadow, the classical model, gives you some idea of the 3D object's shape, but it loses all the intricate three-dimensional detail, the depth, the texture, and especially the dynamic vibrancy of the actual object, UACP atom. It's a simplified, flattened, less resolved representation.
Okay, so it's missing key information. What are the richer geometries UACP proposes?
The UACP framework describes several more accurate dynamic geometries that are crucial to its functioning. Firstly, the toroidal coherence form is considered the true fundamental topology of the field layers around the nucleus coherence core.
The donut shape again.
Yes, that torus shape. It inherently allows for coherent current loops like the electron coherence flow we discussed to form and sustain themselves naturally. It provides a stable, self-organizing pathway for energy and information flow.
And the electron flow within that.
Building on this, toroidal orbital resonance explains where electron flows occur. These are not static spherical probability clouds. Instead, electron flows manifest as helical current loops embedded within this toroidal topology.
Helical loops, like a spring or a spiral within the donut.
Precisely. Imagine a constantly swirling, self-sustaining vortex of energy following a spiral path around the torus, rather than a tiny ball orbiting a nucleus or a fuzzy spherical cloud. This dynamic, helical toroidal structure is seen as essential for maintaining internal coherence balance within the atom and for efficient information propagation. It allows for highly integrated and stable atomic configurations.
Okay, this is a very different picture. What else?
We also have the fractal shell cascade. These are not just distinct, separate shells like onion layers. They're described as coherence-condensed, self-similar resonance layers that structure atomic fields across discrete energy levels.
Fractal, meaning of the patterns repeat at different scales.
Exactly. Like a coastline or a snowflake, these structures exhibit self-similarity at different scales. Each shell represents a fractal resonance threshold within the vacuum tensor. What's critically important here is that while these layers appear quantized,
Meaning they have specific discrete energy levels, like steps on a ladder.
yes, just like the standard model says. But in UACP, this quantization isn't built in from the start as a fundamental rule. It's an emergent property.
How does it emerge?
It's generated via continuous coherence modulation. So the quantization arises naturally as stable notes or resonant frequencies from a continuous underlying hum of the field, like specific stable frequencies emerging as harmonics from a continuously vibrating string.
So quantization itself is an effect, not a cause.
That's the idea here. Then there's the helical intelligence flow.
Helical intelligence flow. Intelligence again.
Yes, the term is provocative. This geometry isn't just about static structure. It's proposed to actively guide energy and information propagation within atomic systems. And the paper takes a bold step by extending this concept potentially even to biological systems.
Guiding information in biology, too.
It suggests an active, directional flow of information that might underpin not just physical processes, but potentially even biological organization and signaling. This implies a deeper, more profound level of information processing happening at the atomic scale than previously conceived.
Okay. Any other key geometries?
And finally, the anisotropic resonance shells. Anisotropic just means they aren't uniform in all directions.
Not perfectly symmetrical.
Right. These are directionally biased coherent zones. Their directional nature helps explain phenomena we observe in chemistry, like hybrid orbitals, SEPI, sp2, sp3, etc., where electron clouds aren't symmetrical but actually point in specific directions, allowing for precise molecular bonding angles and shapes.
Ah, so it connects to molecular geometry.
Exactly. It also helps to explain various magnetic properties of atoms, which arise from the directional alignment of these coherent fields.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned boundary layers earlier than a negentropy layer. Are there others who use the analogy of a conscious skin, suggesting they're really active?
Absolutely. That analogy of a conscious skin is quite apt in conveying their active, intelligent nature described in the paper. Two critical boundary layers are detailed, each with profound implications. The first is the metacoherence boundary.
Metacoherence boundary.
This is described as a dynamic interface layer, a resonant envelope around the atomic system. Importantly, it's not a hard, impenetrable boundary in the traditional sense, more like an energetic field edge.
And its functions.
Its functions are described as truly crucial. It actively regulates the inflow of decoherence, basically, filtering out noise and disorder from the external environment, acting as a highly intelligent gatekeeper.
Protecting the atom's internal order.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's also said to maintain localized quantum memory.
Quantum memory. The atom remembers things.
That's the implication, suggesting that atoms can actively hold and store information about their past interactions and configurations, rather than simply reacting passively in the present moment, showing a form of hysteresis or learning, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it encodes contextual coherence modulation, meaning it can adapt its properties and interactions based on its surrounding environment or field context. It shows a form of atomic plasticity.
Adaptable atoms.
And significantly, this boundary is notably explicitly linked in the paper to observer interaction boundaries.
Observer interaction again. How?
It hints at how observation itself, maybe our consciousness, maybe a more fundamental field interaction, might subtly influence the atom state and behavior right at this edge. It suggests a non-trivial connection between consciousness and the very definition of an atomic system's boundary.
That's fascinating. What's the other boundary layer?
The second, and equally vital boundary, is the negentropy membrane we touched on before.
The one that resists entropy.
Yes. It's explicitly defined as the coherence resonant boundary that actively resists entropy, the universal tendency towards disorder and decay.
How does it do that?
Through active coherence maintenance, sophisticated field filtering, and structured energy retention. It actively works to preserve the atom's complex order.
Like the cell membrane analogy you used.
Exactly. It draws a compelling analogy to biological membranes or cellular boundaries, which are not merely passive walls, but intelligent, active systems that maintain the internal order and vitality of a cell, constantly repelling chaos. This active resistance to entropy is absolutely key to the atom's long-term stability and its ability to maintain its coherent structure over potentially vast timescales.
And you mentioned engineering applications.
Yes. The paper explicitly highlights its significant engineering relevance. It suggests that if we understand and can model this negentropic property, it could lead to revolutionary coherence-based containment technologies.
Like what?
Imagine designing materials or systems that inherently resist degradation, that self-repair or maintain their structural and informational integrity at a fundamental level for extended periods, far beyond what current materials can achieve. This could revolutionize everything from advanced computing, think stable qubits, to energy storage, to material science in extreme environments.
Coherence-based containment. Okay. Let's shift gears slightly. When we talk about physics, we often hear about the fundamental forces: strong, weak, electromagnetic, and gravity. These are typically seen as distinct fundamental interactions in the standard model.
Right, the four forces.
How does UACP interpret these forces or their underlying symmetries? Is it a completely different kind of explanation, perhaps uniting them in a deeper way?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, UACP offers a revolutionary, truly unified perspective that fundamentally challenges the notion of distinct fundamental forces. It's a major claim.
How so?
It posits that the gauge symmetries we associate with these forces, like SU3 for the strong force, SU2 for the weak force, and U1 for electromagnetism, are not fundamental forces themselves.
Not forces. Then what are they?
This is a crucial distinction. Instead, they are interpreted as phase layers emerging from the progressive reduction of a deeper Hesse-Fuso hypersymmetry.
So hypersymmetry, emerging phase layers. Okay, can you break that down?
Think of it like this. These forces aren't inherent, distinct things that simply exist independently. They are different manifestations or states of a more fundamental, unified coherence field, like different facets of a single complex gem being revealed as you turn it, or different patterns emerging in a vibrating medium.
So S is the ultimate origin, the master blueprint, the uncut gem.
Precisely. ISNA is described as the full hypercoherent field, the primordial seed symmetry, and the omnilectic origin of all field resonance.
And hypersymmetry. What does that mean in this context? Higher dimensional symmetry.
It implies a state of perfect, infinite order and potential, a fundamental cosmic template of pure, undifferentiated coherence. It's hyper because it contains within it the potential for all other more specific symmetries like SU3, SU2, U1 to emerge from it.
So how does it reduce into these other symmetries? Is it like breaking?
It's described as a cascade of progressive reduction, much like a prism splitting a single beam of white light into its constituent colors, or different specific frequencies emerging from a continuous underlying vibration as it gets constrained.
Okay, so what emerges first?
First, SU3 emerges. This manifests as internal color field coherence, localized primarily to the nucleus coherence core and the inner toroidal shells.
Color coherence, related to quarks in the standard model.
Related conceptually, but interpreted differently. It's not about literal colors or actual quarks as particles here. It represents an internal dynamic organizational principle involving three coherence vectors within the atom's heart, crucial for its internal stability and structure.
Okay, so an internal field dynamic. Then what?
Then SU2 emerges. This manifests as weak isospin flavor alignment. This symmetry layer is seen as responsible for coherence condensation processes and mediating decay or transformation processes within the atomic system. It influences how atomic states change or transition.
Flavor alignment. Again, connecting to standard model terms but reinterpreting them.
Exactly. And finally, U1 emerges. This manifests as the electrocoherent field, which governs the electron coherence flow and the outermost shell zones. This layer defines how the atom interacts electromagnetically with its environment, its charge interactions, basically.
So strong, weak EM interactions arise as layers of this S symmetry breaking down.
Emerging from its reduction, yes. The paper emphasizes that this reduction happens via coherence eigenvalue selection.
That phrase again. So it's a selective process.
Critical point. It's not a random process, but described as a precise filtering mechanism where specific modes or patterns of coherence are selected, amplified, and stabilized, while others are suppressed or remain latent. It's as if the universe is constantly tuning in to specific resonant frequencies to manifest stable reality.
And the atom structure comes from these selections.
Yes. The atomic structure is stabilized exactly where these different coherence modes, these emergent symmetries like SU3, SU2, U1, intersect and balance across what's called the Coulomb boundary. This interaction forms what the paper terms a nested coherence engine.
A nested coherence engine.
Right?
Not just a structure, but an engine.
Exactly. It isn't just a metaphor. It implies the atom is a self-sustaining micro-engine of reality, constantly processing and balancing these field coherences from its deepest core to its outermost interaction layers, ensuring its stability and dynamic existence.
That's quite an image.
Yeah.
So the electron field, governed by U1, isn't just an outer shell of particles carrying charge. You described it earlier as something more dynamic, almost acting as a mediator.
Yes.
That implies a much more active and intelligent role for electrons than we typically consider. It sounds like the atom's primary interface with the world.
Yes, your insight is spot on. Its role is portrayed as absolutely crucial and far more sophisticated than simply carrying negative charge around. The electron field within an atom in the UACP model is described as a partially reduced coherence structure.
Partially reduced,
It
meaning
means it's still somewhat diffuse and dispersive. It can spread out, but crucially, it remains bound to the atom, not simply flying off into space. This intermediate, partially reduced state is what allows it to act as a dynamic mediator
mediating between what?
between the atom's deeply condensive internal coherence, like that of the nucleus coherence core, which is strongly pulling energy and information inward, and the external interaction channels, the outside world. Think of it as the atom's vital, intelligent interface, constantly translating and negotiating between inner reality and outer reality.
An atomic diplomat.
Perhaps. Its functions are described as multifaceted and truly remarkable. It actively bridges the inner mass-forming fields and the outer information-responsive fields.
Okay.
It's even suggested it can trigger condensation transitions in both nuclear and orbital modes.
Trigger transitions. The electron field influences the nucleus.
That's the implication. It means it can subtly influence the very structure and stability of the atom's core and its energy levels, demonstrating a complex feedback loop within the atom. It's not just the nucleus dictating things outward.
Interesting. What else does it do?
It also actively encodes information fields, such as spin and potential valence, its chemical bonding capacity, through what's called coherent resonant modulation.
So it's carrying information, not just charge.
Yes. The electron field isn't just a carrier of charge. It's actively storing, transmitting, and responding to information, acting almost like a quantum data processor woven into the atom's fabric.
And structurally.
Structurally, it organizes into those complex helical toroidal loops we discussed, constantly resonating with the nucleus coherence core, forming a dynamic, deeply interconnected system.
And you said it connects to consciousness.
Critically, yes. The paper explicitly identifies the electron field as a potential site of resonance with observer field consciousness interaction. This is where UACP becomes truly provocative.
How so?
It suggests a direct, active link between our consciousness, or perhaps a more fundamental field consciousness pervading the universe, and the atomic realm. And the electron field, being the atom's sensitive outer layer, is proposed as the medium for this interaction.
The antenna for consciousness.
That's one way to think about it. Yes, a very sensitive antenna. Speaking of critical boundaries and interfaces, another pivotal one mentioned is the Coulomb coherence boundary.
The Coulomb boundary. Usually associated with electrostatic repulsion, right?
In classical physics, yes, but here it's redefined. It's described as a coherence threshold zone, not just an electrostatic barrier.
A coherence threshold, meaning?
This zone specifically defines the intricate modulation interface between the atom's internal condensive field structures, primarily the nucleus coherence core, which is pulling energy inward, and the external stabilized electron coherence field, which mediates outward interactions.
Okay, the interface between inner pole and outer expression.
Exactly. And what's important to understand is that this boundary is not just electromagnetic, despite the name Coulomb. Instead, it's described as the fundamental resonance boundary, where the coherence is dynamically balanced between the inward focus, condensive, and outward projecting dispersive field flows.
So it balances coherence, not just charge.
That's the idea. It actively governs resonant reflection, allowing fields to bounce off and maintain internal integrity, and also quantum tunneling, permitting subtle fields or influences to pass through barriers that would conventionally be impenetrable. And it facilitates coherence exchange, where information or energy can be precisely swapped across this boundary.
A dynamic gatekeeper.
Ultimately, it sets the precise spatial coherence pressure that is vital for stabilizing the atomic structure itself, ensuring the atom maintains its unique identity and form against disruptive external influences. It's an active, dynamic boundary condition, a constantly self-adjusting energetic membrane, not just a fixed electrostatic barrier.
Okay, so we have these concepts you mentioned a few times, condensive and dispersive coherence modes. What exactly do these terms mean in terms of how fields behave and what properties they give rise to within an atom? You used the analogy of breathing earlier.
Yes, the atom's inhale and exhale of coherence. That's a good way to frame it. These terms describe two primary counterbalancing behaviors or tendencies of coherence that fundamentally determine the inward or outward resonance structure of field forms within an atomic system. They dictate whether energy and information are consolidating inward or diffusing outward.
Okay, so the inhale.
Condensive.
The condensive mode is all about inward activity and consolidation. It actively forms nested, tighter structures. It reduces initial symmetries, moving from the general S towards the more specific SU3 and SU2. And profoundly, it's linked to mass formation.
Mass comes from condensing coherence.
That's the proposition. The SU3 and SU2 gauge symmetries we discussed, which govern the internal, tightly bound coherence within the atom's core, fall primarily into this condensive category. Think of it as the atom's gravitational pull, energetically speaking, anchoring its fundamental coherence pull, pulling energy and information inward to build and sustain its core structure. It's the force of internal organization and density.
Okay, and the exhale. Dispersive. In contrast, the dispersive mode projects outward, interacting with the environment, moving towards potential decoherence if not balanced. It distributes fields, like charge, associated with U1, and spin, into the external environment.
So U1 is dispersive.
Yes, the U1 electrocoherent field and what are termed gravitoelectric shells, related perhaps to subtle gravitational effects, fall into this category. This mode is all about interaction. It mediates the atom's interaction potential with its surroundings, defining its electromagnetic and potentially its subtle gravitational influence. It's the atom's outward expression, its way of sharing information and energy with the universe.
So the atom is constantly balancing these two modes.
Exactly. The dynamic transition and interplay between these condensive and dispersive modes is what continuously and dynamically defines the atomic field geometry and its observable behavior. It's a constant, sophisticated dance, a breathing in and out of coherence that shapes the atom's form, its stability, and its unique way of interacting with the rest of the universe. This constant balancing act is what keeps the atom dynamically alive and allows it to express its properties.
Right, and the concepts of color and flavor, which, as we noted, are often associated with quarks and internal particle properties in the standard model of particle physics. They also radically redefined here. Are they still about particles or something else entirely in UACP?
Absolutely. They are entirely redefined, and this is a key departure from the standard model's picture of fundamental point particles called quarks having these properties intrinsically. In UACP, color and flavor are described not as intrinsic properties of discrete particles.
Okay, not intrinsic quark properties, and then what?
Instead, they are interpreted as the structured emergence of field identities as spontaneous coherence alignment phenomena.
Field identities. Coherence alignment. So they're patterns in the field.
It's a crucial distinction. They arise from complex, dynamic field organization and interaction within the atom, specifically within the core region, not from pre-existing static particle traits.
So how is color explained?
Color, associated with that emergent SU3 symmetry, is explained as rotational coherence among three condensed internal field vectors. The paper calls these quark-like states, but critically they exist within the nucleus coherence pole as field dynamics, not as separate, distinct particles rattling around inside.
So SU3 color is about how fields are rotating or relating within the core.
Exactly. It expresses specific coherence rotation modes internally within the nucleus, like a complex internal ballet of interacting fields. But these are not actual particles. It's a dynamic internal field organization that gives rise to the properties we associate with color charge and the strong force, but it's a property of the field itself, not of a subparticle.
And flavor, associated with SU2.
Flavor, associated with SU2 symmetry, is described differently. It's portrayed as angular modulation of coherence vectors. It represents a temporal or spatial symmetry resonance of energy states.
Angular modulation, like wobbling or changing angles.
Something like that, yes. A dynamic change in the orientation or relationship of coherence vectors. This is reflected externally in phenomena like atomic decay, weak interactions, and valence alignment, which affects chemical bonding in the atom's outer shells. It emerges specifically via helical toroidal symmetry combinations, again highlighting the profound importance of the atom's dynamic geometry and its internal energetic choreography.
So the flavor of an atom, which influences its radioactive decay or chemical bonding, comes from how these internal fields are dynamically twisting and turning, interacting via SU2.
That's the picture UACP paints, yes. And these processes of self-organization, the emergence of color and flavor dynamics, occur spontaneously through the coherence gradients that extend from the atomic core out to its shells. This dynamic is essential for what the paper describes as nucleon stability. even though it's not a nucleon in the traditional sense of a solid particle composed of quarks, and for the atom's unique identity, as well as its ability to resonance tune with external fields.
So it's a self-regulating, self-organizing system that gives rise to these complex emergent properties, allowing the atom to maintain its form and interact with remarkable precision.
Precisely. It's a holistic, dynamic view.
Okay, so let's pull back and look at the big picture. What does this entirely new framework, UACP, enable us to do or understand that traditional models perhaps struggle with? What are its broader implications for science and technology, and even our view of reality, beyond just redefining the atom itself? This sounds like it could reshape everything.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, UACP, if validated, provides a potentially truly unified framework, and its implications could be incredibly far-reaching. As we touched upon, it fundamentally aims to bridge quantum field behavior, atomic structure, and critically biological coherence processes.
Bridging physics and biology at this fundamental level.
Yes. This is a significant leap, as many current scientific models struggle to unify these vastly different scales of reality under a single, coherent theoretical umbrella. UACP suggests a fundamental shared coherence principle underlying all these phenomena, from the smallest subatomic interactions to the complex self-organization of living systems. It points to a universe that is potentially far more interconnected and coherent than we currently appreciate.
And the technological implications.
Well, this integration could lay the foundation for entirely new classes of coherence-engineered technologies. Imagine technologies that don't rely on brute force manipulation of matter, static materials, or simple chemical reactions, but on precisely modulating the underlying coherence fields.
Engineering coherence itself.
Exactly. This could lead to revolutionary breakthroughs in materials science, designing self-healing incredibly robust, or even programmable materials by tuning their negentropic properties. In energy, it might lead to highly efficient, stable energy generation or storage methods based on maintaining field coherence. And in medicine, imagine coherence-based diagnostics or therapies that work at the fundamental energetic level of cells and atoms, promoting order and function.
And predictive power.
Furthermore, the model, being mathematically detailed, allows for new, potentially more precise predictions regarding atomic behavior, particularly isotopic variation and stability, maybe even explaining anomalies. This opens up entirely new avenues for experimental verification and further refinement of the theory itself.
Okay. And you mentioned that negentropy membrane again, its engineering relevance.
Yes, to tie back to that crucial point. Its potential engineering relevance is described as immense, moving beyond mere theoretical elegance, because it's described as actively resisting entropy through active coherence maintenance and field filtering. If we can understand and replicate its principles, it could be directly modeled for coherence-based containment technologies. Think about designing barriers that don't just physically contain substances, but actively maintain order and integrity at a fundamental level, filtering out disruptive influences.
Like a perfect container.
Perhaps. This could have profound implications for everything from creating ultra-stable quantum computing architectures, protecting qubits from decoherence, to advanced material preservation for long-duration space travel, or even revolutionary approaches to waste remediation that actively reorganize chaotic matter back into coherent forms.
Wow. Reorganizing waste. That's ambitious.
Yeah.
Okay. We absolutely have to circle back to consciousness. We touched on observer functions and consciousness-like fields earlier, which, for many listeners, I imagine, is a truly radical departure from conventional physics. It pushes us into realms often considered more philosophical or even spiritual.
It does.
What's the profound implication of their explicit inclusion in the very architecture of the atom? Is it just a clever metaphor, or is it meant to be something far more tangible and active in this model?
This raises an important question for you, the listener, and it's perhaps one of the most profound and challenging aspects of UACP, requiring careful consideration. The framework explicitly includes what it calls the observer consciousness meta-operator.
Meta-operator.
This operator is described not as a passive observer just watching things happen, but as an active participant, potentially directly controlling coherence modulation at atomic and systemic levels. So it's not presented as a metaphorical witness. It's framed as an active shaper of atomic reality.
An active shaper.
Yeah.
And the electron field connection.
And as we discussed, the mediated electron field is specifically identified as a potential site of resonance with this observer field consciousness interaction. This suggests the electron field, being the atom's primary interface with the outside, is exceptionally sensitive to and interactive with consciousness, however that's defined individual or universal.
So this isn't just a philosophical add-on.
It's presented as a core mechanistic component of the theory, not just a philosophical interpretation layered on top. This suggests a deep, active, and fundamental connection between consciousness, whether it's our own individual awareness or a more fundamental, pervasive field consciousness inherent in the universe, and the fundamental organization of matter itself.
Moving beyond the passive observer of quantum mechanics.
Far beyond. It moves us away from a view of the universe as merely inert particles following deterministic blind laws. Instead, it suggests that observation and consciousness might play an active, shaping, and organizing role in reality at its most fundamental level, constantly participating in the dynamic dance of creation and manifestation.
It really challenges us to rethink the very nature of what it means to be conscious and how deeply intertwined our inner experience might be with the outer physical world.
It absolutely does. It places consciousness not as an epiphenomenon of matter, but potentially as intrinsic to its very structure and dynamics.
So what does this all mean for you? As you listen to this, consider this thought, as you go about your day. What if the universe isn't just a collection of inert, separate particles bumping around in a void, but a vibrant symphony of interconnected, dynamic, coherent fields? A universe where even our own observation, our own consciousness perhaps, plays an active, participatory role in shaping reality at its most fundamental level.
It's a powerful thought.
What does that truly change about how you see the world around you? The chair you're sitting on, the air you breathe, the thoughts running through your mind? And maybe more importantly, what does it change about how you see yourself, knowing you might be intrinsically part of this grand, coherent, and potentially conscious dance of existence?
A fundamental shift in perspective.
Today, we've taken a really deep dive into the unified atomic coherence physics framework, a truly radical redefinition of the atom. We move far beyond that familiar image of tiny solid particles orbiting a nucleus.
Far beyond.
We explored a vision where the atom is a dynamic, nested coherence field system emerging from a foundational ondolectic vacuum, sculpted by coherence gradients, and perhaps even guided by consciousness-like operators.
It's a complex, integrated picture.
We've seen how UACP reinterprets everything from mass and charge as emergent properties to the very forces of nature as emergent phase layers from a deeper underlying hypersymmetry.
Right.
And we've touched on the incredible implications this could have for engineering entirely new classes of technologies based on coherence, and perhaps most profoundly, for our understanding of the active fundamental role of consciousness in shaping the very fabric of reality. We really encourage you to ponder the implications of such a unified framework, one that aims to connect physics and even biology at such a fundamental level. It certainly urges us to question what we thought we knew about matter itself.
Absolutely. And this deep dive was really just a glimpse into the vastness and complexity of the unified atomic coherence physics framework as proposed by Philip Randolph Lillian in this paper.
Just scratching the surface.
Exactly. It highlights how much more there is to explore, not just within this specific model, but in the broader scientific landscape when we dare to fundamentally rethink our most ingrained concepts about what reality truly is.
A challenge to our assumptions.
It opens up entirely new frontiers for understanding and discovery, challenging us all, scientists and laypeople alike, to look deeper than ever before into the coherent, dynamic, and maybe even conscious nature of the universe we inhabit.